welcome to
Okay.
Sponsor Talk with One-Click LCA and Fernando Barrios. And Fernando, you can tell how you want to questions if you want to answer in the end of your session or during the session, however. So please go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. So hi and welcome everybody. I think we have still 15 seconds. But yeah, so the way I'm going to answer questions is the following. You can put your questions in the chat or the QA, and I'll answer at the end of the meeting, at the end of the webinar, because I'll try to make it in 15, 16 minutes. So we have like 4 or 5 minutes to answer your questions. So after saying that, let's simply start. So now, yes, 11:30, I can actually say welcome everybody. Today, I'm going to talk about how to automate climate declaration and accompany with one-click LCA. First, a little bit about me. My name is Fernando Barrios. I'm the business developer for the Nordics, Iberia, and Latin American region. I am an environmental engineer. I have a master's degree in environmental engineering from KTH, Royal Institute of Technology, and I work mainly with building LCA, infrastructure LCA, EPDs, and GHG reporting. First, carbon requirements in Nordic countries. You might know that we can say that today construction is measured in carbon. This is getting much importance in many countries, especially the Nordic countries. And how are they doing it? How are they measuring this in carbon? Well, the Nordic countries are moving to regulate carbon footprint of construction. They are doing it in more or less a similar way, but there are some differences. So for example, Sweden, we're talking about the Klimatdeklaration or Klimatdeklaration in Swedish is mandatory from January 1st of 2022, and it's going to limit values for carbon footprint from 2027. Boverket is the one in charge developing the method, and this is supported in one-click LCA. Denmark will have also a calculation mandatory for 2023. This is for, there's going to be limits for buildings that are above 1,000 square meters from 2023. This is also supported in one-click LCA. Finland, direct introduction of carbon footprint limits scheduled by 2025. This was developed by the Ministry of Environment, also supported in one-click LCA. And if I have any Norwegian here in the audience, you might know that this is mandatory already in Norway for quite a long time. Cities are introducing requirements as well. The method well known and is 3720, and it's of course supported in one-click LCA. Iceland regulations are under consideration, therefore no method to be supported yet. So we're talking about now 4 methods, 4 different databases, but we could say one LCA tool. And that tool is one-click LCA here, because as I said before, we supported all of them. If I talk specifically about Sweden, I would like to say a few things about it. The first one is that this is a regulatory method that covers A1 to A5. So that's basically extraction of raw materials, transportation to the factory, manufacturing process, transportation to building site, and installation into the building. There are generic database generated by Boverket, approximately 171 generic data. But this generic data has something called a conservative factor. This conservative regulatory data incorporates a 25% top-up factor. So if you can read Swedish, if I have any Swedish person in the audience, here it says that these generic values are, in terms of CO2 emissions, in general, 25% higher due to this conservative factor. That's why it's very important to use EPDs. In case you're wondering, an EPD is an environmental product declaration, and you can use EPDs using one-click LCA. Therefore, you can complete your calculations using one-click LCA and using EPDs. And in fact, if you cannot find an EPD you can ask a certain manufacturer to develop an EPD, because we help them develop EPDs using our one-click LCA EPD generator. We've been deeply involved in the development of the Finnish regulation, for example, over the past decade. This started as a voluntary method, then regulatory feasibility, and now it's a regulatory limit value. So we've been quite involved in this process, because for us, it's not only a matter of developing our software, but it's actually developing the market. And what about carbon requirements in other countries? Is this something that is only in the Nordics? Well, not really. Embodied carbon is becoming the norm in global green building rules and certifications. So for example, in the graph here, this is according to the embodied carbon review. What it's in green is embodied carbon address, whether by rules, certifications, standards, etc. And what's in gray color is embodied carbon, not address at all. But as you can see here, we have 12 in North and South America, 20 in Northern Europe, 9 in Asia Pacific, and so on. So this is something global. This is not just here in the Nordics. This is not something that we can say, oh, this is just in the Nordic countries, it's just going to stay here. No, this is global. This is happening, and it's becoming the norm. And because this is becoming the norm, we have to cover this globally. And that's why we are the world's leading construction LCA software. We have customers from over 100 countries. We support more than 40 certification. We have more than 100,000 data sets, and we're about 50 employees from more than 15 nationalities. We support, as I said before, different modules. So for example, BREEAM, LEED levels. In Sweden, miljöbyggnad, no CO2, Klimatdeklaration. But at the same time, we also support Green Star, quite well known in Asia Pacific, or as I said before, LEED, quite well known in North America. We have, as I said before, a global database of around 100,000 data sets, and this includes EPDs from all over the world. EPDs in North America, in Europe, Asia Pacific, South America, etc. So we have a global coverage. And these are constantly updated, verified, and of course, enhanced. We try to connect the whole industry. So before I said that if you're using our tool for climate declaration, it's better if you use EPDs due to this conservative factor. But if the manufacturer doesn't have an EPD, the manufacturer can develop one using our tool. So as you can see here, if you are an engineer, if you're an architect, if you're a manufacturer, we have different tools for you. We have tools to make your job easier, and we have tools to connect the industry so engineers can connect to manufacturers and vice versa. And here you're seeing some of our customers. Some names are quite well known, including, for instance, Sweco or Skanska. So we try to make it simple. We try to make our software user-friendly, and we see that there is a huge demand when it comes to automating carbon assessments. But only a few BIM tools work well for the early phases, when you are just in the concept phase. It's very important to work in the concept phase as well, because in the concept phase, your influence on impacts, environmental impacts, is quite big. The closer you are to the build stage here on the right side, the less influence you have on impacts, because basically you have decided everything already. You have decided the location, you have decided the shape, you have decided the materials, you have decided so many things that your influence and impact is not big anymore. But when you're on the concept stage, on the other hand, you have the possibility of deciding so many different things. You can see, oh, is it going to be better if we make this on concrete, or what about wooden materials? What about if we change its shape, and so on? That's why we have we support, or we provide integration, for instance, for Rhinoceros, Grasshopper, or Tekla Structural Designer. And it's not only that we support this software. In fact, we have tools for different stages of the project. So if you are in the concept stage, as I said before, well, we support Tekla, Rhinoceros, etc. If you're in the design, we have BIM integrations, for example, Revit. If you are in the strategy, we have different add-ons and so on. So that's why we can support you regardless of the stage of your project. And the BIM automation is available for over a dozen platforms. Before I just said Tekla and Rhinoceros, but we also support Revit. We support IDA, IC, Design Builder, Microsoft Excel, and so on. And if any of you joined Pano's presentation before, he showed a bit how we do it. So he actually showed this parametric LCA optimization using Grasshopper. Unfortunately, I don't have the time to show step by step how we do it, but this is more or less how it looks like when you use Grasshopper for LCA purposes. And as you can see here, you can see in real time how changing your project shape will affect carbon emissions. At the same time, you can choose materials you want to use and run a set of variant calculations. And of course, you can define your building parameters. Regarding Revit, we have developed different plugins, and in fact, we're constantly upgrading them because the demand is changing, the market is changing, and so on. But here you can have like a more or less a picture about how we do it. For example, here you have an isolated material, and here you have different parts of the building and how you can start matching different elements with an element from our database. And the software will tell you, for example, the impact, and we'll do it in a very graphic way. As you can see here, it says very high, high, average, low, different colors, because that's quite intuitive. Usually people associate green as low carbon impact and red as high carbon impact, for example. So it's really intuitive. At the same time, the software can already tell you the tons of CO2 and so on. If you use BIM, but you do not do LCA, we have a feature called Send Me Data. So this is basically if you work with an LCA expert who needs data from you, you can use this. So you're not doing the LCA, the expert is doing it, but you have the BIM model and you can send the data so he or she can start the calculations. And finally, when we're talking about LCA, it's not only about numbers. It's not just about, oh, my project generates 300 tons of CO2, or my project generates 2 kilograms of CO2 per square meter. It's also about how to present this information. It's about how easy it is to understand the result that I'm getting. And that's why we focus on also on visualizations, because visualizations can definitely help you to understand and to make decisions. That's why we present the information in graphs, pie charts, Sankey diagrams, resource type, tree maps, etc. Because the more visualizations we give you, the easier it gets to make decisions. So for example, if I'm looking at this picture here about building circularity, I see that 72.7% of the materials that I use are virgin. Or if I want to look, for example, at one of the columns here, I can say, for example, oh, now I see that 75% of the emissions are due to concrete materials. So it's not a matter of just numbers, it's a matter of understanding them and make decisions based on them. If you are interested in seeing a bit more of this, because until now I've just described how we do this, but I didn't show you step by step how to perform a calculation using one-click LCA, or how to do an integration with BIM or Tekla or Grasshopper, etc., etc. But if you are interested and you want to see a bit more of this, please join our webinar. It was initially on April 20, but that actually changed today. But nevertheless, I'm going to put the link on the chat, and if the date changes, it's going to be updated there, and you can join. This is a free webinar. It's going to have a duration of approximately 1 hour, a bit more, and it's going to be in both English and Swedish. So that was it from my side. Thank you so much. And I think if you have any questions, I'm going to check it now and I'll try to answer before the time expires. Okay, so Joe, let me stop. You said I wanted to ask if there was any available guidance of best practice modeling for use with one click. Yes, there is actually a guidance that we have on our website. I can try to find it now and put it here. Otherwise, if you can, I'll try to find your profile and I'll send you a message later with that information. But yeah, we have guidelines about it. And Christer Johansson, you asked, so Tekla structural designer and not Tekla structures. Actually, we're talking to have both. Until now, yeah, it is Tekla structural designer, but we believe that we can support as well Tekla structures. And I think the question, what is an EPD? That's a question from yesterday, so I don't need to answer. So great. If we don't have more questions, thanks everybody for joining. Have a great rest of the day.